I was very scared of grief, but when I really look at it, I was actually scared of what I thought grief would look like. I was scared of the pain that I was attaching to grief as opposed to the actual experience of it.
Hey everybody, this is Lori Schulweiss.
And I'm Jen Giamo.
And welcome to another episode of Everybody Talks, the podcast where we explore the wide world of wellness. Sometimes we talk to experts, sometimes we talk to each other, but we're always talking to you.
Every week we discuss topics from nutrition and exercise to mindfulness and self-care. And today we are exploring all of the emotions around how we experience grief and loss.
It's a deep one. Let's get started.
Okay, she is a leader in wellness, a multiple New York Times bestselling author, and a 20-year cancer thriver. I love that word. She's been called a force of nature by O Magazine and was named a new role model by the New York Times.
She's been featured in Forbes magazine and the Wall Street Journal and has shared her message of well-being on shows like Good Morning America, The Today Show, OWN, and The Oprah Winfrey Show. As a motivational speaker, she's lectured around the world. She's a member, of Oprah's Super Soul. I feel like I have to say that. Super Soul 100, recognizing the most influential thought leaders whose vision and life's work are bringing a higher level of consciousness to the world.
In her latest book, I'm Not A Mourning Person, Braving Loss, Grief, and the Big Messy Emotions That Happen When Life Falls Apart, she shares what to expect when you're not expecting your world to fall apart. We're going to talk about that today.
We're already crying.
If we can get through it. It's raw, it's inspiring, but it has joy and humor and hope. She's helped millions of people take charge of their health. And today she's going to inspire us with her wise words.
She is.
Please welcome Kris Carr.
Please welcome, Kris. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, my two new friends.
So grateful to have you here.
Yes, 100%. Is there anything else that we should be sharing before we dive in? And believe me, we are ready to dive in.
Yeah.
That you want to share about yourself, your story. I mean, just a little, maybe there's a little short version of your story to recap for those that don't know who you are.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do that. So, unexpected wellness warrior, right?
Mm-hmm.
I, like many of us, we fall into this life because we're up against the ropes. You know, something goes down and it throws our life upside down. And so the first time that happened to me was over 20 years ago on Valentine's Day when I was diagnosed with a rare and incurable stage 4 cancer. And the first doctor suggested a triple organ transplant. And I was like, I don't know a lot about medicine, but that sounds foolish.
Yeah. Sounds a little scary.
The second one gave me 10 years to live. And that was really the inciting incident. Because, I remember standing at the elevator at a very well-known cancer hospital and pressing the down button and feeling like my life was going up in flames. But there was this voice that came up that just said no. And it inspired me to participate in my well-being and to sort of say, look, I got to figure out a team. I got to figure out a plan. But ultimately, I got to figure out how to be the leader of my life. Mm-hmm. And to learn how to participate, in my treatment plan. Because what happens as patients is a lot of times, you go into the hospital, you go for your scans, you go for your treatments, and then there's all this time in between where you can just sit in fear and anxiety. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was like, okay, during that time in between, I am going to figure out how to take care of myself. At least I can do that. So that kind of started the journey. I have been teaching and kind of sharing my experience for 20 years now, talking about difficult things. And those are the things that inspire me because I feel like the difficult places are where so much of our freedom lies. And I pick it up here with this new book, I'm Not A Mourning Person.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said something in the introduction. This is when I knew I was going to love this book. There's a line that I loved so much. It was right in the beginning. I'm just going to read it really quickly for our listeners, if you don't mind.
I'm agreeing with Jen on this.
I thought this was funny, but also a little heartfelt. So you say, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Grief sucks. And it isn't a solo flyer. Grief rolls with an entourage of complicated friends who all demand bottle service at the club. Emotions like weariness, judgment, shame, jealousy, self-loathing, and all the other not so glamorous feelings we don't want people to know we're experiencing. I just thought that was fantastic. And so clearly grief was one of the catalysts, for writing this book. But what were some of your other inspirations for this book?
I'm going to be honest with you, especially with your background. It had been a while since I'd written a book. It's been 7 years. I've been doing this for 20. And I've written 7 books. It had been probably maybe even 7 years since my last one came out. And so it's like, in book time, that's hello, grandma. Do you understand? Back in my day, we just had a pencil.
Yeah.
So we were like, I'm thinking about this book and I'm thinking because it had been a bit and I really wanted to write for a wider audience because I've written a lot for cancer patients. I've written for people who want to change their diet and their lifestyle. And so I talk about and teach an anti-inflammatory plant-based diet. And my publishers were like, can we hit a broader demographic here?
Yeah.
Because you've got so much fun in you. You got a lot to say to the people, but it would be great for you to have a book that would be more applicable to more humans. And so I sat there and I thought, yes, this is the time for me to write my inspirational, you go girl, you got this, let's take life by its balls book, but everything in me was like, I need gin and Bengay and a nap. I cannot write that book. This is not what is happening for me because we're in the middle of a global pandemic. Yeah. I'm coming up against my 20-year anniversary of living with cancer. My chosen father is dying of stage 4 cancer. My business is faltering because I'm putting so much time and energy into my family, and I hadn't life-proofed my business at that point, right?
God, so what an amazing word.
Nobody did.
That's an amazing word.
Yep.
Life-proofed.
Absolutely.
And what that looks like, right? If you step out, things fall apart, right? Because you don't really have a strong structure in the first place. Yeah. And so it was just one of those moments where I found myself back down on my knees and like saying, if I'm going through these experiences, there has to be a whole lot of other people going through it. There was so much coming up for me. And I remember when my therapist said, something I write about in the book, which is when the grief train pulls into the station, it brings all the cars, right?
Totally.
It brings stuff you thought you were over. It brings up all these other emotions like rage and jealousy and shame, like all these big emotions. So I'm holding all this stuff and saying, this is what I want to talk about because this is the barrier that's keeping me from really experiencing this time with my dad and keeping me from what I like to use as my own mantra, which is fully alive living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that.
That's how it started.
I may have just started to cry as you were just talking about
I've been there's chills running down my body since minute 1 here, but we're going to get through this. We're going to get through it without crying. We can do it. We're strong. But really, so Kris, was it a cathartic experience for you?
Right. Did it help?
Was it very, were you breaking down as you were writing this, or maybe both?
Oh, it was all the things. It was cathartic. It was healing. We created a lot of temper tantrums. It was something I wanted to throw the laptop at the window. Thankfully, I hired an outside editor who is just so amazing. And to be honest with you, I had a choice. It was like I was going to hire somebody who was just very sweet and loving and, oh, that's just lovely. Or somebody who's awesome and scary.
Yeah.
And I chose the awesome, scary gal who was such an incredible mentor for me and would push me to go deeper and deeper. Because what I wanted out of this book more than anything, I like to set a goal, a personal goal, and then a goal for the book with all of my books. And the personal goal was to flex my muscles as a writer and to, I don't know, just become a better writer, quite honestly. And then the goal for the book is that it can help people who are really avoidant of these deeper places because we think that if we go there, we'll drown, we'll never survive, we'll never come back. It'll just take us out to sea. And so we avoid doing it, not because of actually, for me, I speak personally, I was very scared of grief. But when I really look at it, I was actually scared of what I thought grief would look like. I was scared of the pain that I was attaching to grief as opposed to the actual experience of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, oh my gosh, I know. I mean, and you talk about anticipatory grief, and we
Yeah,
kind of touched on that, and we'll get to that. But
Yeah.
I just want to, there's a scene in the book where you are sitting in the parking lot of CVS and you have this overwhelming feeling of grief. And it's such a vivid moment. Can you just share that a little bit for our listeners who haven't read the book yet?
Yeah, it's in the early in the book. And it was one of those moments where I don't know if you've ever had this or anybody listening has had this experience, but like that nerve gets hit and you just want to run to a ladies' room or the, dressing room and lose your shit, but you don't want anybody else to see you, so that was the moment I was in CVS and my mom had asked me to go and pick up some Ensure because it was the only thing my dad could keep down. And he had about a few weeks left at this point. And so here I am in the aisle and I know what flavor he likes, chocolate mocha. And I'm sitting there saying, okay, how many should I get? I'm doing the math.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not consciously choosing to do this, but this is the place that my mind takes me.
Yeah, sure.
And in that moment, that's when I realized that, how many more days, minutes, seconds do I have with this person so dear to me? And it all came up, all of it, everything that I was pushing down, hustling harder at work to try to outrun the demons and like ride the dragon before it devoured me. It all came up and I literally dropped the mocha Ensure and started running like a lunatic through CVS, got to my car and just let it all out. But here's what happened next. It was like the moment I talk about this in the book where the medicine kicks in and the fever breaks. I felt better.
Yeah.
I felt better. And so I said to myself, if giving myself this one experience helped me feel a little bit better, a little bit more connected, a little bit more open-hearted, where else in my life am I holding myself back from having that opportunity?
Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting. Yeah. And it's like I think people fear it, right? They fear the feeling and they're so afraid of what that might feel like. And then once you let it go, you're right. It's,
you
it's
just
not
feel better.
As bad as, it's still horrible, but it's nice. It's a release, some form of a release. And I think that, there's so much stigma around grief and we're taught to avoid it and, suppress it.
And even just talking about death. I mean, Jen and I recently had a conversation just with each other because I'm going through something right now with my dad. She's gone through that with her father. And so that's, I think, also why this resonated so much. You can see I'm getting like...
I know, you're going to cry. I know. But yeah, we talked about how afraid we are. I mean, I'm afraid of so many things about death, my own mortality. As you get older, you start to think about your own mortality.
Sure.
And then obviously as your parents age and then, you have unexpected things happen in your life. I had an unexpected death in our family a couple of weeks ago, completely out of nowhere. And it like shocks you,
But I also like that you refer to these as ruptures in your book and that it doesn't have to be a death. I mean, Jen and I both have had divorces. That was about as horrifying a rupture as you can go through also without someone dying. And so, and how those ruptures kind of make you reassess, and you start from that point and you like can get like, okay, like, let me look around. Let me see what we're doing next.
And Kris, you've had, quite a few significant ruptures in your life. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that and what you've learned from those?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back for a second because I really want to inspire people to be willing to explore their feelings. So I want to pick up on where we were just talking, then I'm going to talk about ruptures. Okay. So what I have found is that when we push it down, when we hustle harder, when we refuse to do the heart tending, really, that it comes out in other ways. It's like emotional physics, right? It's going to pop up in some other way, like pop goes the weasel, and you might not like the way that looks. And so if we think about emotions like energy needs to go someplace. Energy is in motion. And that's what our emotions are, is energy, right? They're also information. They're here for a very specific reason, to teach us something. Anger says, ow, that's not right, right? So if it's information, we can start to look at it in a different way. So maybe we're a little less resistant to it, and then get curious about it and say, oh, well, what can I learn from you? What are you trying to teach me? And then how can I care for you? It's kind of like what I've been saying a lot in podcast interviews, is equating it to my diagnosis and saying, oh, I have got 24 plus tumors, a couple 6 packs of tumors in my liver and both of my lungs. How about I learn a little bit about my liver and both of my lungs and what they do? Oh, curious. You guys do a lot of shit. This is how can I help you? I would like to help you. Yeah. Oh, you prefer this? Fantastic. I can do that, right? So if we take that same sort of silliness and curiosity and a way to reframe it, so we diffuse any maybe resistance, but also judgment that we have about the emotions that we might be feeling. Oh, I'm judging myself so much because I feel guilty. Oh, well, let me learn about that instead. So I wanted to just take a moment and camp there, because my goal with every conversation that I have about this book is for people to walk away and say, you know, I am resisting this one feeling. Yeah. What if I approach it differently? And I'm here to tell you that your 2024 will be much more expansive if you do.
Yeah. It's so true. It's hard to do that, though. It's hard for people to
super hard.
Be introspective like that and you know, talk about or think about what's the lesson here, because you know, you look at something like that. I mean, I was putting myself in your shoes when I was reading about your diagnosis and when you found that out, and I mean, there's no way I would have been as strong or done with it what you have done with it. I don't think. I mean, I love the fact that you wrote this book, because I think people who are going through these things can now, you know, hopefully adopt that same approach.
Definitely,
but I mean, I was like losing my breath as I was reading that, and I'm thinking, gosh, I don't know how I would have reacted to that. I think I don't know, but anyway. So, but you're right. It's like, if you can just take a step back, and I love the fact that you went and you learned about it, because so many people don't do that either. They just, you know, or they take what a doctor says and they take all the medications and they put all this other stuff in their body. That
I know. I like that you kept it a secret from your own doctor that you were doing all these things. Yeah, you know, on the sly.
Which is so great. It's so great. But you were able
what
to.
Are you doing? I was like, just get it out. I'll tell you later.
Right. But you did a combination of the traditional and the holistic, and you know, you knew what you needed to do, right? But
well, I want to go back to your question and also say that your path forward, with all the things both of you have experienced in your own lives, is like, we use what we got. And for me, what I got is creativity. Like, that's the place I use my creativity to help me figure shit out.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's why I write books, is because creativity helps me heal. Right. So, but for somebody else, it could be that their own healing mechanism looks different, but we each have one, you know. Look at this beautiful podcast you have. You know, we all are using what we got to try to figure out how to come out of this life scratch free and stain resistant, you know?
Yeah. And just, and to share that message and hopefully help other people. I mean, that was
definitely
what our, you know, reason for this.
That's our purpose.
What our reason for doing this is.
Yeah, exactly. So we're all going to have ruptures, as you said. There's the moment where life kicks you in the teeth and the rug gets pulled out from under you, and you say, if I survive this, I'll never be the same. And guess what? You won't. You're going to be different. And more than likely, you're going to do a lot of growing and you're going to learn a lot more about yourself. And hopefully, I think the goal is to learn how to befriend yourself more and to be able to say, girl, I got your back. You know, I got your back. We're going to figure out how to get through this. I don't know right now, but you got a friend in me.
Yeah. Yep. And something you said, Kris, is like, you know, you refer to moving on versus moving forward. Can you just explain what the difference is between those two things?
Yeah, I think look, we are humans. We want the rainbow. We don't want the rain. right? Hold the rein, but give me the bow.
Right.
Yeah.
Give me the pot of gold.
But unfortunately, it's like it doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I had a conversation with a girlfriend of mine. She said, okay, listen, she's type A and she's amazing and she's got an incredible platform and she figures shit out. You know what I mean? She's just like, look, I'll read your book and I'll do this work, but only so that I can prevent grief. I'm gonna hack my way around this, right? And my parents are getting older. They're going to die. So if I read this stuff, I'm going to be fine when that happens, right? And I was like, no.
Sadly, no.
No.
But it ties in perfectly with your question because I'm that kind of person too. Like, what do I have to do to not experience the shit I don't want to experience?
Yeah.
And this idea of moving on versus moving forward or moving through is because I think we want to have it behind us, close that chapter, not have to deal with it again. And there's this great philosophy by Carl Jung. I'll mess up what the quote, but it's basically that we orbit around these same themes our whole life. And with each passing orbit, we find a new layer of meaning. Right. So what that tells me is that we're going to keep coming up against the same stuff. Mm-hmm. And so we're not necessarily putting it behind us or beating ourselves up like, dummy, you haven't figured it out yet. Look at you again at this place. We want to avoid that and just say this is a natural part of being a human. We're going to orbit, but with each passing orbit, we're going to grow. We're going to learn a little bit more. We're going to have a little bit more wisdom.
Right.
Maybe we won't burn our paw so much again next time, but it's going to happen. And so we can't say, my dad has passed and that hurt is over.
Right. It's never over.
Not over.
It's never over.
Yeah.
It's not over. It's not going to, it doesn't feel as vivid as the moment.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's not I'm not as ripped wide open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I cried yesterday.
Sure.
Yeah. Totally.
And it was a nice cry. It was like one of those, that's a good memory.
Right.
I miss you, Dad.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think I always said to people, like when I was going through my divorce and stuff, and everyone was like, it was 6 months, it was a year. It was like, they're like, you're not over it yet? Why aren't you over it yet? I'm like, I don't know that I'm ever going to be over it. Like I'm through it, I'm past it, but it changes you, right? It's like, I always tell people like, it gets different. It just gets different. It's not the same. It's never going to be the same. Your life will never be the same. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just is,
There's a chapter in the book called Awkward Times.
I know. I was just going to say, I love that chapter because
great.
I've said some of those things.
Inappropriate things. We all have.
Everyone has, because you really don't know what to say to someone.
Give us some tips, Kris.
Yeah.
What do people say and what should they say?
Well, first and foremost, we all lose our minds. So go ahead and forgive yourself and give yourself some grace because none of us know how to, navigate storms of this magnitude. I say in the book that we live in a grief-phobic, messy, emotions-averse society. Mm-hmm. So we're walking around clueless and don't beat yourself up if you've been this person. You'll be this person again, more than likely. I certainly will. But there's a few behaviors that I've come to understand that we might do. So first and foremost, we might ghost the person because we don't want to get it wrong. So we say nothing. Yeah. But that the person then only feels more loss, more absence, more isolation. Right. We may center ourselves and make it all about us. Oh my God, you went through that? Well, let's get a listen to this. Yeah. Right. And the person's like, okay, yeah, here we are meeting in common ground of, despair, but we haven't talked at all about my heart now. And it's all about you. Excellent. Fun times. Right. So we center ourselves. Or if you're me, you might start to give a lot of unsolicited advice because you think you're the best coach on the planet. You know what I mean? So all of a sudden I'm teaching, I got lessons, they're flying in hot and nobody wanted a coaching session. My husband will say, nobody paid you for that. Nobody was like, oh, please let me give you my money.
Right.
So I have to be like, hey, this is what I do when I'm uncomfortable. I try to fix it for this person because I love them and I don't want them to be in pain. So let me fix it.
Yeah.
And I think what these moments of, the big messy emotions, it's our opportunity to just show up. Show up for our people and to say, look, I don't know what to say if that's the case. I don't know what to say. I love you. I'm here to listen. I'm here to just spend time with you. And sometimes for me, I'll say, especially to my best friend, I'll say, do you want to brainstorm or do you want to vent?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you just want to vent, I'm here. Let's go.
Yeah.
If you want to brainstorm, I'm going to put that hat on. But letting them take the lead, I think it also takes the pressure off of us because we don't know what to say. So if you let the person take the lead, then you're bound to show up in a way that just at least feels very heartfelt.
Along those lines, I mean, I did like when you talk about like reading the energy of a room when you're around someone who is going through something. And that resonated with me because, like I said, I'm going through this, my father's ill, and there's a long story that goes with that. But I think you're right. Like, we're not reading his energy. We're kind of like feeling uncomfortable in the space, trying to make small talk, not really talking, like talking around him instead of to him. And that just like hit me over the head with a block when I read it, because I was like, oh, when I go see him this weekend, I want to talk to him, I mean, he's all there, he's not, as physically capable, but it really was like reading the energy that is around you, his energy, which is like tired and all those things, and really realizing what is going on and not trying to make yourself feel better. I mean, that just really...
I think that's what we do. Like, we want to, like you said, you want to fix it and you don't want to feel uncomfortable around the person.
Right.
So you're like,
it's like becomes very kind of almost frenetic, and not the energy that he should be receiving from us, by the way.
Right. Yeah.
So. That's really powerful. That's so wonderful, and wonderful that you pick up on that and want to flex it, and the thing that I know from that experience is there's times when you're going to get it wrong and it's going to be awkward, and be willing to be in that awkwardness and the tears that happen that then you might feel bad about. But I have found personally just that willingness to show up and say, especially with my dad when he was approaching the last chapter of life, to say, is this something you want to talk about?
Yeah.
And when I opened that door, I read about, not knowing how to do it. And I went to my therapist and I was like, I'm so afraid to get this wrong. And I'm also afraid to like lose my shit and then make him feel bad. Mm-hmm. And she just said, why don't you start by talking about it? Yeah. It's like a little pre-show warm up, like have a little production meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
Something I can completely relate to.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And you don't have that, you don't have the actual conversation that day, but you have a step towards it. And so I did that. And what I was amazed by was how much relief he felt in potentially having that conversation, because he said it just feels so lonely. Everybody else has moved on. And everybody else is firing at the speed that they're used to firing at, but I can't fire at that speed anymore. Yeah. And I would really like that, because I'm struggling with how different I feel and how isolated I feel. And not everybody's going to want to have the conversation though, right? Yeah. And that's okay too. In this case, the person did. And so it's like, okay, now you just gin up the bravery.
Yeah. Right. You have to get the courage
to do it.
To even present those options. Do you want to, Kris, do you think it's different, like for people that, and maybe there's no answer to this, but for people that know that, their time is coming near, their end is coming near, versus people who, may have gotten a diagnosis or they're sick, but they don't want to think about or acknowledge even the thought of death, right? Like, how would you talk to a person who's maybe not at the stage where it's inevitable, but they're 95 years old and you want to have the conversation? I mean, like, do you,
No.
I don't know.
I kind of wish I had had that. My grandmother lived to 98 and was in great health and saw her every weekend. But I wish I had had a conversation like that with her, because you get tired. It takes a lot to live.
Yeah, like
when
I
you're
wonder,
98.
are people afraid? Like, I know I'm afraid. I'm afraid
Yeah.
of my own death. And
Sure,
like I said,
as am I. I think we talked about,
Yeah, okay, let's figure this out together, because I don't have the answer, but I do think that we can figure it out and figure out what it could look like, and we're going to make mistakes, right? So we have to just give ourselves grace, as I say. Have you ever had a conversation with somebody where it's a tough conversation to have? Maybe it's with a partner, maybe it's with somebody at work. You got to have the conversation, and you're avoiding it, and then it's making things worse in the relationship. And maybe it's in that, like, I can talk about my own relationship. There's topics that I've been afraid to touch because I'm afraid of what's going to happen if I do. And yet there's something in the relationship that isn't working, right? And it just festers. And then there's a separation that will grow into an abyss. Isn't it awesome when we actually gin up the bravery and have the conversation? And more often than not, it goes so much better than we thought it would.
Absolutely.
And you feel better afterwards, not to mention.
Feel better.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it's death, and we have outsourced death and we have institutionalized it. And if you think about how much energy it takes to bring a child into the world and how much excitement comes with it, and I don't have kids, but I know people who have kids, and kids come with a lot of stuff, right? They need stuff. There's parties, there's cribs, there's things.
Yes.
There's a list.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go buy this list, and then we'll all get together and celebrate.
Yeah.
And yet, this is another passing. Like, so we enter this world and we leave the world, but it's the leaving is just as complicated. It is busy. It takes a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
You need stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing if it's a sudden tragedy and a sudden loss, but if somebody in your life is declining slowly from an illness, there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
There's hospice, there's a hospital bed, there's
Sure.
we got to tie up our wishes and our wills and all the estate planning, all this kind of stuff. And yet we ignore it.
Yeah.
Ignore it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the person going through it would probably feel better if we broach the topic. Even if they don't want to talk about it, it's like, oh, this person cares. I'm not ready, but thank you.
Right.
And then more often than not, it's sort of like, oh my gosh, thank you, because I'm really overwhelmed by how much is going on here.
Yeah,
I know that for myself. Like so when I was newly diagnosed, I met my biological father when I was 18, and when I was newly diagnosed, I was in my 30s, and we had a really difficult conversation about my will. And he wasn't in my life. And so I kind of felt like, who are you to come in with these demands? Yeah. And there was a part of me that I wasn't ready to start talking about that.
Right.
And I certainly wasn't ready to talk about it with him because we didn't have that kind of relationship.
Sure.
Right. Sure. And so I put it off. I didn't deal with any of that kind of stuff. And now at this time in my life at 52, I'm like kind of excited to figure it out and just at least have some of that behind me, of just sort of some peace of mind. It doesn't mean I'm not scared and I want to spend as much time alive as possible. But I think that each and every one of us probably have, especially as we get to midlife, this like nagging concern about like, well, what do I do? There's some peace of mind that comes with it. And so we just have to shift our perceptions like everything else.
Yeah. I feel like it's a lot of decisions that have to be made that you don't necessarily
want to
make, or you're not really sure what the right thing to do is.
Right.
And, it's funny, like I think of it from the flip side of like, my parents, for example, will say like, I just want you to know where all my things are. And this is where this is. I'm like, stop. I don't want to talk about it. So I'm the one who doesn't want to talk about it. I'm the one shutting it down and saying like, oh, please stop. Like, don't be, my mom was like giving things. I go, why are you giving things away? She goes, oh, it's less I have to clean up when I'm gone. I'm like, come on, so I am like, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe this is making me change my mind a little bit and be more open.
It's like I said, I mean, your book hit so close to what I am currently going through that it just made me rethink everything and the way, I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. So the 5 of us dealing with this all in different ways, all have different relationships with my dad, it's like 5 personalities. There's a personality of his wife, which is also in the mix. It's like all kind of dealing with the situation. It's like that Rashomon, like you're all looking at the same thing, but you see it in such different ways. Mm-hmm. And because we're all different ages, we're also seeing it in different ages. I'm seeing my dad through the eyes of a 60-year-old that I've had him most of my life, and I have a sister who's in her 30s and a brother who's, and so she's in a different time of life. And so it's just interesting. Just in a way, it made me want to change the way. I really owe you a debt of thanks because it really is changing the way I'm looking at the situation right now. Yeah. Truly.
Yeah.
So thank you.
It really is.
That wasn't a question, by the way.
No,
but that was.
That I know. Look, these are the big talks, right?
Yeah, they're tough.
Yeah,
they're like
they really are.
They're
I just want to put a button on it because whenever we're in that place where we say things like, I don't want to talk about it, or even when we say it to ourselves, like, oh God, no, please don't bring this up. You could something that's helped me is to just say, what does love say? What does love see? What does love see? What does love say? Love sees that this would give my mom a lot of peace of mind, and so it's like, okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet, but all right, I'll get there.
It's just like, what we do, we thaw around these things.
Yeah.
And, like each conversation, I think, makes us a little bit more willing to try. And when it comes to stuff, it's like, I've just decided it's really hard to figure this stuff out. I'm going to let my nieces fight over the jewelry, and I'm going to give everything to the dog.
Right, to the dog. That's what I always say. I'm like, my dogs are going to get everything.
Totally. Yeah.
I just want to switch gears for a second and talk about, our emotional health and our physical health, because, you kind of went on this path of finding things out for yourself. And, there's so much research that connects our emotional health with our physical health. How do you think grief affects our bodies physically?
I think we hold a lot of emotion in our bodies, and the research says that that's true, right? So we don't necessarily, I can't say, it's going to show up in your plantar fasciitis, right. which is where it feels like it's showing up for me right now. But we know things like, oh, I have no appetite. Oh, I have a ravenous appetite. I can't sleep. I'm sleeping all day. Right? My digestion is off. I can't, I have diarrhea. I'm constipated. Like, we hold so much of this energy. I call it the issues in our tissues.
Oh, yes.
And it's not our fault. Yeah. And it's not like, oh my gosh, I caused this illness because I was so freaked out about this, that, and the other thing. It's this, that we have a holistic system. And if we think about it, at our core, we are an ecosystem, right? We have rivers and streams, we have soil, we have this delicate inner terrain. And the quality of our terrain determines the quality of our health. Well, one of the biggest things that hits our terrain is inflammation. So it's the root of many of our chronic illnesses, or just our, shit pickles du jour.
Right. Right.
And so what are some of the things that create inflammation? So then we break it down, and we know that stress is the number one. Yeah. Well, guess what? It's really stressful to go through these difficult times, especially if we're not tending to ourselves. Now, it doesn't mean we need to do a full-blown makeover show. Lori, it's not the time to produce that.
You don't want the magical makeover box? We used to have that, by the way.
but it's like, how can we lower the bar?
Yeah.
How can we lower the bar on some of our self-care practices so we don't put it so high that, we're destined to fail and then feel bad about yet another thing in our lives? But we could lower the bar. I often joke, like, lower the bar so low that you're going to trip and give yourself a concussion.
Right.
That's funny.
Just lower it, because even that thimble size amount of self-care starts to fill the well. It gives you that moment of relief. It gives you that moment where if you've got cortisol flooding through your body and other stress hormones, that deep breath allows you to go, okay, I'm back at my baseline here.
Yeah.
I'm able to self-regulate my nervous system. And that is what's going to keep you resilient, moving forward, being able to move through, not on.
Yeah.
Well, that brings you to your 5 pillars. Is it 5 pillars of wellness and well-being? Is that? And so, the breathing is definitely one of them. Do you want to elaborate?
Yeah. So the 5 pillars are something, they're really the basis of lifestyle medicine. So it kind of sprung up for me with 21 years of research and practice as a wellness advocate and patient, of if I were to distill this down to the things that really make the most sense and move the needle on our well-being, what are they? And here's why I think that this is important, because I've been on this journey for so long. It's a marathon, it's a practice. There's no finish line. And we always have the latest trend and the latest hack and the latest fad. And we're like little lemmings. We just like,
yeah. Oh my God.
Whatever they're doing now,
yes,
we'll follow right along.
Exactly.
Yep. So true.
Yeah. And look, we all fall prey to that. And so, but if we think about creating a home base or like just a foundation for ourselves, what I have found is it's about focusing on 5 things. It's about focusing on what you're eating, what you're drinking, what you're thinking, and how you're resting and renewing.
No.
Right? Those are the pillars. And you don't have to do them perfectly. You just really want to be more mindful, more conscious, and say, more often than not, am I drinking enough water?
Right.
More often than not, am I not drowning my sorrows in a bottle of Pinot? More often than not, am I moving my body? And especially, as we get older, we want to be thinking about our physical strength and functional fitness. I don't know about you, but I threw my neck out maybe a couple months ago, and somebody said, "How'd you do that?" I was like, "I slept."
Exactly.
I'm with you. We're the same. It's constant.
Yeah, it's this high impact sport called sleeping. Called reading a book.
Yeah. Oh, I looked over my shoulder.
I sneezed.
Yes, and now I'm in traction.
Totally.
So we're tending to these areas of like, okay, I'm not going to punish myself at the gym because, first of all, I hate that. I got a lot of other things to do. But could I move my body with like a 10-minute video, a 20-minute video 3 or 4 times a week? You know what I mean? In the comfort of my own freaking living room. Yep. Yes, I can do that. And so looking at the pillars, they all rest on that foundation of stress management, aka reducing inflammation. Yeah. And that's what I try to teach people in my community is like, we're going to water each of these pillars, and we're going to take care of them on a regular basis. And we're going to do it in a way that allows us to be consistent and keep going, as opposed to fits and starts, all or nothing, black and white.
Yeah. And it's achievable. It's attainable for people. They don't feel frustrated or defeated because you're taking those small steps towards,
let me give you one quick example. So diet, it freaks everybody out, myself included. And so instead of changing anything about your diet, here's my tip for you in the pillar. Add before you subtract. You don't have to remove anything. All I'm going to ask you to do is add some fruits and vegetables at every meal. It could be a smoothie. It could be a side salad. It could be you get the broccoli rabe as a side for dinner. I'm asking you to add before you subtract. And the more you do that, you start to crowd out the stuff that doesn't serve you, right?
Absolutely.
So that's the way I approach the simplicity of this.
I want to talk about, because this is something I struggle with. I may have mentioned it. fear and anxiety. And you talk about that in the book. How can we, because I mean, you believe that everything is here to teach us something, right? So what are we learning when we experience fear and anxiety? What is that here to teach us? Because I need to know what this lesson is for me.
Well, look, I have spent a lot of time in these two places, especially as somebody who lives with cancer. Yeah. And what I have learned is, again, going back to the idea that all of our emotions are information. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So fear and anxiety from an evolutionary standpoint kept us safe, right? Fear, a tiger, run. If you don't have that fear, you'd be like, what's up, buddy? You want a beer? No, you're going to get eaten.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Anxiety. What is anxiety? Anxiety is like a ruminating about something that may or may not happen. Mm-hmm. Right? So you start to be able to do projections. You start to be able to like analyze the data and say, well, in the past when I ate that berry, or I got the scoots.
Right.
You know,
right.
Exactly.
Maybe I should be anxious about berries. Who needs the scoot? Right. So my point is that if we start to understand them again, we can say, okay, this is here to teach me something. What is it? How do we handle it though? So we get the message. Maybe the message is, maybe you did a breast exam and you felt a little something funny. Right. And then you say, I am really, you get that wave of fear, that wave of anxiety. And I would say the lesson there is to, first and foremost, we need to confront it. We need to go get it checked out so we can get it behind us. Because if we don't get something like that behind us, anxiety is going to take over. Right. And anxiety is the ruminating. It's the stories we tell. It's the next thing you know, you are literally planning your funeral. The DJ is going to come and, you know, all the things, the places we go. I write this story in the book about being afraid of a scan that was coming up and how I was basically like washing the dishes, lost in the story that I was telling myself about this upcoming scan and what if I die first and I'm going to die first and poor Brian, my husband. And I love Brian so much. He's going to be so lonely. And now I hope he finds somebody else, but not somebody younger and prettier than me.
Exactly.
Right? And now I'm still washing the dishes and now I'm seeing him with this young, pretty woman and he's happy. He's happier than he's ever been with me. And now I hate Brian. I can't stand the man. And he's in the other room.
I have no idea.
You know, he has no idea what's going on. And later on, he says, hey, babe, have you seen my glasses? And I say, why don't you consult your child bride?
Oh my God.
Her. Right? And he's just like, what has happened?
What happened? You create this story that's so vivid in your mind that you're like. So vivid.
Someone I know is very guilty of what you just said.
God.
We are all very creative human beings. You know, I often joke that the difference between me and Stephen King is that he's got a much bigger bank account. Okay.
Yeah. Oh my
God.
Yeah.
What do we do in those moments?
Yeah.
We say, this is my brain on fear and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
I am future tripping. Mm-hmm. In this moment, this isn't happening. I'm talking to my new gal pals and we're having a gas, right? That's what's happening. So we kind of have to like snap ourselves out of the story. And we can do that with the breath. We can do that by walking to the mailbox, by calling your best friend. You could do that in so many different ways. Some people will wear a rubber band and just snap it.
Yeah. I know,
right?
yeah.
Snap yourself back to this moment.
Physically snap out, yeah.
Right. Where the child bride doesn't exist.
Right. Exactly. That's hilarious.
So it's kind of like just so de-escalating it in a way that, you know.
You're changing the channel, right?
Yeah.
You're changing the channel and bringing yourself. It's like I like to think that we can't always solve the problems of the mind with the mind. We need to get into our bodies.
Yeah.
Right. So we get into our bodies and we come back to this moment. And in this moment, you know, that's not happening. You can come up with a better game plan. You can, first and foremost, soothe your nervous system because you can't make good decisions when you're having an out-of-body experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's being rational, you know, totally. And I think anxiety is mine is so irrational.
And I even think you talk about how with like, speaking of the dogs, like how when you're training a dog and they're doing something like barking uncontrollably, that you need to like divert their attention so that it snaps them out of,
Yeah. It's like having a hotspot. We all have our own hotspots. We need somebody to give us some cookie or rub our ear to be like, hey.
Yeah. Hey. Just get that serotonin, that dopamine kind of flowing back in. But so you talk about trauma, obviously, in the book. And, you say that it's not what happened to you. It's what happens inside you as a result of what happened to you, right? So does that mean that two people, like she and I, experience the exact same trauma, it's going to manifest differently in our bodies? And then what do we do to heal that? Like how, tell me about that.
So that quote is from Dr. Gabor Mate, and everybody, his most recent book is so spectacular. And I think we all have trauma, right? We don't get through this life scratch free and stain resistant. And it's about where we hold it and what happens inside ourselves and how it can continue to be activated. And I think when it comes to things like trauma, with all this stuff, quite honestly, it's really hard to do this alone. And that's where I would say, find your support system, find your, not only for me, it would be a therapist or some sort of practitioner that you can work with, who you can not only talk about what's going on, what's coming up for you, but you can actually access the parts of your body where it's showing up. Like, this is where a lot of other like somatic therapy and EMDR, these are such really powerful things to sort of like help rewire the circuits. So you want to find your support system there. It's sort of like if you were diagnosed with cancer, you wouldn't just not find a doctor to talk to.
Yeah.
Totally. If you're diagnosed, or you're not going to go to the podiatrist if you've got something going on with your eye.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So know that your emotional well-being is the same. It's like an emotional organ system you could think of. So you want to look for your practitioners, and then those good friendships, like the beautiful friendship clearly the two of you have developed. We all need our buddy. We need that person that is our ride or die, our true blue. And maybe you're blessed to have a pack of humans to do that with, or even just one person where you can say, this is me, and they say, this is me. And we say, well, I love you for who you are, and let's travel this life together. Because like we've been talking about, the beautiful moments happen and the brutal moments happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you put it like that, it sounds so simple.
I know.
It's like, well, of course. That
What's the
makes
problem?
all the sense.
Oh
You're right.
God.
I mean, we do hold those in places in our bodies. And that's, that's something that I like. I mean, look, I've been trying to practice all of these different things for years now, ever since my divorce, and those feelings and being able to like feel in my body where it hurts. Like, where is it manifesting, and how do I do that? And I've definitely made progress in that, but that's something that I definitely struggle with. I mean, for me, it's always like an upset stomach. My stomach hurts, and I couldn't, when I was going through it, I couldn't eat, and I was like sick all the time. And I just, so it's like, well, with somatic, right? You like hold those areas in your body, and you do the breath work and stuff. And so it's practicing it though, right?
Yeah. That's really it, because you have the awareness. I'll just slide one more thing over for anybody listening. Here's a very simple writing prompt that you can use, and you can write this every day, and it'll take you, maybe give yourself 5 minutes. How am I feeling?
Yeah.
And you can even say, how are you feeling? Like spirit talking to self. How are you feeling today? Just to even start to get in connection with and in awareness of what's going on.
Yeah.
You don't even have to take it further than that. You don't have to fix it. It's just saying, how am I feeling today? And let that prompt guide you. And the more you do it, the more you get really clear about what's going on with you. And even if it's your tummy, you say, well, what's that about, tummy?
Yeah.
Right. I am that person that walks down the street talking to themselves. All the time. I usually have bird food in my pocket because I love birds. And so I'm talking to myself and throwing bird food around.
I'd love to run into you on the street.
I know.
That's great. You know, there's this meditation app that I use, and it asks you every morning or every time you go to do the meditation, how are you feeling today? Or what is your, you know, and it gives you like the smiley face. It's like you're feeling okay, you're feeling sad, you're feeling angry, and you know. So that's a great one too.
I'm bad about that. I don't do any of those things. And
well, you know, but
I
hearing,
should. I like hear you talk about them. She tells me, I know what she does. And
the difference here is that Kris talks about it and practices it and actually achieves
you
that state.
Do that too.
I am
you
like,
do that too.
You know, I do the things, but I don't always believe myself. So I'm like,
that's okay. I don't believe myself either. You know, what I was so surprised by was this sense of abandonment. And we talked about trauma a moment ago. And I remember when we were talking about when the grief train pulls into the station, it brings all the cars. For me, part of it was that early abandonment of being left when I was conceived. You know, my father left when I was conceived. We met each other later in life when I was 18. He left again when I was 31, when my first book was published, and I wrote something he didn't like. So the abandonment for me is my kryptonite. And I'll do a whole lot of things to avoid it, including abandoning you first, or not trusting, or having to spend a lot of time with somebody before I open up because I'm afraid. That's what trauma looks like. It's in our bones. It's in our behaviors. It's what happened inside of us at these inciting moments. And, you know, when my dad was in that therapy session, as I was becoming clearer, like, oh my gosh, he's actually really going to die, I said, he's leaving me. And he wasn't leaving me, he was dying. But the little girl was still struggling with daddy leaving and daddy never being there. And now I have this incredible father, and I'm going to lose this? This is why we need those safe places to just process these
it's
very
so true. I
common
mean,
human emotions.
For myself, you know, the abandonment is very real, and I kind of push it aside. Oh my God, I can't even speak. You know, when I was going through my divorce, I hung on so tight because I was like, oh, here's another person that's hitting the road. You know, you just see people hit the road around you and you're like, ugh, here they go again. You know, and it just resonated because of that. And now this. Right. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm hysterical. But it is so true that is so the trauma is so deep in you. You don't even know. Like, I don't even know I know where the tears are coming from also anyway, but they come from such a deep place, and it's like a furnace that just like explodes, and you have no control over it at all. It's crazy.
Well, I think when you try to suppress it, or you try to ignore it, like you just said, you always push it aside. Totally. It's even deeper and stronger.
I forget that this is part of that for me. Like, I always forget that that's part of it for me.
Of course.
You know?
Of course.
Yeah.
But you just modeled what healing looks like. You just modeled it because you were brave enough to talk about what was happening. You were open enough and willing enough to allow emotion to flow and to move energy. And that's like the day in, day out process of finding that peace and feeling more of that emotional freedom. You know, so people say, where do I start? Where do I start? You just did.
You know, I always accuse Jen of using these podcasts as personal doctor's appointments. I feel like I used this. I did it. It was my turn. I couldn't wait to talk to you today after this book.
So just one more quick thing. You know, your dad shared so many life lessons with you that you talk about in your book. Can you tell us like a few of them that had the biggest impact, or one that had the biggest impact on you?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I love that. Thank you for asking. So one of the things that I love, he always told me to do the hard thing first, especially in business. Make the call, send the email, have the conversation, do the hard thing first, get it behind you.
That's great. Yeah, that's
great. And I try to do that. And more often than not, it's definitely a struggle, but it's how I really want to show up in life. So I slide that one over. Another one was, he said, if you love somebody, tell them. If you feel it, say it, because life is too short.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
So being able to say, I love you. Mm-hmm. And again, going back to that, like, what does love see? What does love say? Letting love lead. Yeah. You don't know what to do. Just get out of the way and let love lead, and everything will be fine. And then the third thing, this is probably one of the most poignant things that I love talking about and sharing and having as an experience and a compass for myself, which is towards the end. We were out to dinner and we were celebrating his birthday, and he owned his own business and he was in construction, and he never would have gone away over the summer because he paved roads and that's your busy season. And he had just sold his company, and he was, celebrating with us. And he said, I wish I had given myself more moments like this. Mm-hmm. He said, we work so hard and we save it all up for later, and we've got it all backwards. He said, love, you gotta make your golden years now. Mm-hmm. Make your golden years now. Don't put them off.
Yeah.
Find a golden moment, a golden day, make it a golden opportunity. Weave more of those golden moments into your daily life. Mm-hmm. And it's so beautiful. And I will say that though he thought, yeah, here I am, 70, I've sold everything. I've sold the company, and now I can go play golf with my brother Jay, and now I can do these things. And now he couldn't.
Yeah.
He had 4.5 years in that period. And yet I saw him do so much healing, so much personal growth, being able to unravel his own debilitating anxiety, make peace with his past and with relationships, and actually apply that advice, even though it was a much shorter window. Right. But I saw him live in that golden state every day.
Yeah.
This is what life is about. It's not about the quantity. It is about the golden quality.
That's amazing. I'm now crying.
I know.
I love that.
I know.
And so, sorry.
That's all right. I was crying in the beginning. Jen is crying now. I mean, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was going to say, in the end, was he at peace with what he knew was?
I think he was.
Yeah.
You write about his death so beautifully.
Oh my God, the whole book is
so beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
We should all, not all have that experience, but when we all have that experience, we should all have it as beautiful as that.
I know.
Sounded like it was, truly.
It was hard. And it was my parents are my spiritual teachers. Yeah. And I have had the privilege of being on stage with some of the biggest spiritual teachers.
You have.
And then you're like, should I really be on stage?
Yes, you should.
That's a subject for another podcast.
Yes, you should.
But just to see how they even healed their relationship in that last chapter. And, I write about it in the book of just as my dad was dying, my mom had her hand on his heart, and I was holding his hand, and she was coaching him.
Yeah.
I love you. You're doing so well.
Yeah.
You're doing such a good job.
Yeah. So courageous. Okay. That is so courageous and
so big. And all those moments when I thought my mom was crazy and can I just trade you in for another model?
Yeah.
I was like, damn, woman.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we still have so much to learn from both of them. Mm-hmm. And I can still learn from my dad, even though he's not in physical form.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Sure. And that's so brave. And it's so, brave of your mom, brave of you. And to write this book is just so
it's
brave
really
and inspiring. And, oh God.
Thank you.
Sorry. If our listeners want to hear more from you or learn more about you and your infinite wisdom, where can they connect with you?
They can find me at kriscarr.com. Okay. I'm at Crazy Sexy Kris, which is a whole other story. Okay. On Instagram. And the book is available wherever books are sold. And I promise if you come and hang out with me, it won't be scary.
I'm ready to hang out with you more. I'm ready to-
I know.
The book again is called "I'm Not a Mourning Person: Braving Loss, Grief, and the big messy emotions that happen when life falls apart." And Kris Carr, you are extraordinary. Thank you so much for spending your time with us
Oh my
today.
gosh.
We really, truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, that was.
How you doing there? You all right? Do you need tissues?
I need tissues. I mean, that was really extraordinary. I mean, there's a reason why she does what she does, you know.
I'm almost like speechless. Like she's
too.
so, I mean, I was speechless during the book, but then just listening to her, and she's so, even just her attitude and her demeanor, the way she's delivering this
Oh my
information,
God, it's so
like,
calming.
this is hard shit. And
She lives with cancer. She
Oh
lost
my
her father, who was, you know, her adopted father, her chosen father, as she said.
Right.
And it just,
she's incredible, and
Yeah.
the book is incredible, and I could see why she's on Oprah's list
I
of,
know.
you know, influential
yeah,
thought leaders.
100%.
Wow.
100%.
So yeah, we have to like link all her stuff
Yeah,
here so
and
people can.
we both obviously highly recommend her book, especially, I mean, look, grief is something, no one is immune. No one escapes it. Everyone grieves something, someone,
And no one's
something,
prepared for it either.
and you are not prepared. And then it
Ever.
hits you. It hits you like a Mack truck.
But I think what she was saying about like moving through it and feeling all the things, like when she was talking about her her breakdown in the CVS parking lot,
Yeah.
you know, all I can think about, and this, you know, this is not
Right.
death, but for me, it was a death at the time.
No.
And one of the things that
the
I
same.
did right after he left, going through my divorce, I remember going up to the beach because I'm like, where can I go and scream like really loud where no one will, and it was the winter time, and I walked up to the beach and I like took a towel with me and I went up and I just screamed into the towel like I just lost my shit.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a release, and like, yes, I did feel a little better in the moment, but she is somehow able to really
I mean, she zeroes in on an
She
emotion.
gets it out.
She
She-
gets it out. And she's, yeah.
which is amazing. Anyway.
Well,
okay.
we hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. And thanks for listening. I'm Lori Schulweiss.
And I'm Jen Giamo.
And this was Everybody Talks.
Talk to you next time.
Take care.
For more information about our podcast, to learn more about us, and to catch up on all of our episodes, go to our website at everybodytalkspodcast.com.
Follow us on Instagram at Shuli, at Jen Giamo, and at Everybody Talks. And if you want to watch today's episode, go to our YouTube channel at Everybody Talks Podcast.
Join the Everybody Talks community by checking out our Facebook page where you can ask questions, post comments, and be part of the conversation.
And don't forget, if you like what you've heard, give us a 5-star rating, write a review, and tell a friend. We're for everybody and everybody. The Everybody Talks podcast is co-created, executive produced, and hosted by us, Lori Schulweiss and Jen Giamo. Produced and edited by Eric Jackowitz.
Our theme song music is written and performed by Jackie Ryle and Aaron Navisi, with additional support from our pups, Oliver, Milo, and Murray.
Talk to you next time.